But were there any interesting kind of unique trends that you've seen on your side of the country, or just in your day-to-day of what both you work on?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it was like really there was definitely right like some shifts when as buildings. I think especially not quite immediately because buildings use a lot of their load kind of regardless of how many people are in them, if there's like any people in them. Um, but there was a shift, right, obviously from areas that were super workplace oriented towards more residential spaces. And where I think that gets more interesting for a lot of uh, grid operators is like in the summer when all of a sudden you're dealing with like air conditioning load in spaces that like maybe you didn't really have it before, right? Like people weren't home and so their air conditioner wasn't on. And now you have all these people moving back, like being back home and like being in their home all day and they're like hot and so they're running things. Um, I know like very anecdotally for me personally, like my usage has gone up like 30 to 50% each month versus the prior year. Because I was really good about turning things off and like didn't do things. And I'm a relatively social person. So like me coming, turning things off during the day might mean that it's not coming on until like 9 p.m. at night and it's been crazy, right? It's been like this huge increase in cost for me that I was not anticipating.
Is
And I
that a
think
write-off? Can you write that off?
no, because we don't technically working from home. It's like a designation by your company. If you're
Yeah.
like at your home, if you're a home office. I did look into this. I spent a lot of
We
time
got to
trying to
change
figure
that in
out
the
if I could
post-COVID
get
world.
if I could get tax reductions.
Sorry, go
Well,
on.
that sounds like the next thing you need to get the Slack team to get around together on. I'm sure a lot of them are working from home too.
Right? But no, so I think I think for me, one of the questions is like almost like what will be what like there were a lot of I think short-term trends. Like what are the long-term trends of COVID going to be in terms of like how we work, right? Like if we aren't going back to these office buildings, like will they convert to other things? Will they figure out how to better manage some of the like usage and load over time? And like how, I'm not a believer in the New York City is dying fan that's been flamed. But a lot of people are moving to the suburbs and like does that have meaningful change? I don't think it will in the long run, but I do think you could see grids are managed super locally, right? There's feeder level issues, there's network level issues, and I think you will see impacts from that. I think it's hard to like tell what that will shake out over the next couple years, but it's something that is forcing grid planning groups to like really have to like think at a very granular level how their forecast might need to change. Because when you're talking about substation upgrades, like it matters if people are in like one borough or another.
I was just talking to this cogeneration developer in New York City. He's like been around for a long time, been doing this in multifamily buildings for a long time. And like the way he put this, I thought was so interesting. He remarked on the same thing, right? That, lots of people are working from home and, increases power needs and like the shape of power needs. But the way he said it is basically, we now believe there is commercial load embedded in multifamily buildings. And that changes a lot actually, right? Because a lot of people use like rules of thumb to think about like how different buildings use energy. Utilities use generic load profiles to like bill reps, right? Like, and his point was just like moving forward, there is commercial load inside of multifamily buildings. Like
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
when you start thinking about like line
neat.
extensions and all sorts of stuff, like how I mean, there's obviously kind of clear delineations, but you're right, it starts kind of making the waters a little more murkier. Where do you see that kind of in the short term going, or as far as like, are you seeing that with those discussions, how they're looking to try and better incorporate that? Do they have any sorts of numbers that they can tie to that, or is it to be determined?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure. Colleen might know better than I. But
yeah, I don't have a good sense of how it's being incorporated. I have a feeling that, you know, this year has been so turbulent and there's so many unknowns that I think right now it's kind of like a wait and see, and like keep closer tabs on it, right? I think for a lot of places, because ultimately, like, investment decisions aren't made overnight
Right.
by planners or people, and so like figuring that out will take time. But it's certainly something that will be really interesting to watch.
I
I
think
will
that's a
say,
great.
oh, sorry.
Oh no, go for it. I was just going to say, I think that's a great point. It just seems like a lot of this will be, it'll be interesting to see how much of it's short term. But what were you going to add, Duncan?
I was just going to say, like, I agree investment decisions aren't made overnight, but at the same time, like right before COVID hit, I was developing, for example, a portfolio of hotel projects. Like those fell off a cliff. Like, and it's not just short term, right? Like, I don't know. Let's hope that in the summer, COVID's like kind of over. That doesn't mean those hotels are credit worthy anymore. So I do think this could have like interesting long-term impacts that aren't necessarily the obvious ones. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's stuff like that. And, you know, you layer in, I think, you know, a lot of people will move back to cities, but probably not all of them. It will probably have accelerated some trend. A lot of people will go back to the office, but probably not all of them. And so I think there will be some long-term changes we see out of this.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to visit our website, connectingthegrid.com. There you can listen to our podcasts, contact us about sponsorship, or even be a guest on Grid Connections. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a positive rating on your favorite podcast or video streaming service. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out a lot too. Thank you again, and I look forward to us learning more together soon.